If you follow global financial news, you are likely familiar with the celebratory headlines surrounding emerging economies. We frequently see terms like fastest growing nation or GDP milestone leading the evening broadcast. On paper, aggregate national wealth across several developing economies is expanding at a historic pace. Yet, if you step away from television studios and speak with families managing their monthly budgets, a more complex reality emerges. Many hardworking citizens look at these soaring macroeconomic charts and ask a very grounded question. If the national economy is expanding so rapidly, why does it still feel like a struggling to manage everyday household expenses? This apparent contradiction has become one of the central questions in development economics. To understand why this happens, we have to look at what GDP actually measures. Gross domestic product tracks the total value of goods and services produced within a country's borders. That doesn't make GDP a bad measure. It remains one of the most useful indicators of economic activity. It simply answers a different question. GDP measures economic output rather than income distribution or many aspects of individual well being. This matters because, depending on how an economy is structured, rapid growth in highly productive, capital intensive sectors may not generate enough employment opportunities for the broader workforce. When an economy expands without a corresponding widespread rise in stable jobs, we witness a phenomenon known as jobless growth. For context, the recent data from International Labour Organization highlights that while global unemployment figure fluctuates, over 2 billion people worldwide remain trapped in informal employment. Jobs that often lack stability, social protection, or rising wages. It creates a scenario where a nation's aggregate balance sheet thrives, but the average family's purchasing power remains static. However, this challenges also presents a massive structural opportunity. Many developing nations are currently experiencing a demographic dividend, with millions of young, capable people entering the workforce. Economics specializing in development emphasizes that the goal isn't to slow down growth, but rather to ensure its foundations are broad based. Data shows that when governments prioritize sustained public investments in core infrastructure, primary healthcare, or vocational education, it lowers the cost of doing businesses for everyone. By intentionally supporting labor intensive sectors, whether in light manufacturing, modern agriculture, or regionalized services, countries can cultivate a robust domestic market. When ordinary households earn reliable incomes, their consumption patterns naturally sustains the wider economic system from the grounds up. Of course, navigating this path carries distinct risks that require careful policy management. Some development economists argue that opening domestic market to rapid, premature external liberalization before local industries are fully competitive can leave an economy highly vulnerable to global shocks, sudden capital flight, and volatile import cost. If the gap between aggregate economic growth and household prosperity widens for too long, domestic consumer demand can begin to stagnate. Over time, this imbalances the economy, creating a structural hurdle where a country risks falling into what the World Bank classifies as a middle income trap, where growth flattens before a nation can fully transition its population into stable long term comfort. History offers valuable guideposts on how to balance these forces, though there is no single blueprint. If we look back at the historic poverty reduction achieved by several East Asian economies in the late 20th century, their trajectories relied on a complex mix of state supported industrial policies, land reforms, heavy investment in basic human capital, and access to global export markets. They ensured their domestic labor forces were highly capable and integrated into manufacturing before fully liberalizing their financial systems. Conversely, nation can transition rapidly into advanced, service-led models without building that broad-based employment foundation, often found that wealth remains siloed. History suggests that a resilient economic framework is rarely built from the top down, it requires a deeply inclusive foundation. As we look to the future, the global conversation among policymakers is quietly shifting. GDP tells us how much an economy produces. It doesn't by itself tell us who benefits from that growth. That's why economists increasingly look alongside GDP at measures such as employment, wages, poverty, inequality, education, and health. It's about moving our definition of national success towards a more complete picture.